can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right. Good evening, all. Good to see you on this lovely day. How's everybody doing?
It's good.
Hanging in okay? You got a pen? You're going to take notes?
We're going to see.
The pressure's on. Now I feel like I got to say something smart, you know? I always think of, I don't know if she's joining us right now. She just had a baby 2 months ago, so she's a little occupied, but and she won't mind me calling her out here. I always think of Megan, who's been around here for many years. And as soon as I saw that, I thought of her, and she'd always sit like right around here. And she just like wrote everything down. And it was really funny because it was like this interesting moment where I realized, like, wow, people actually listen to stuff I say. You know, that's still like really strange for me, you know, to like think that like you speak and people may actually benefit from something is really a interesting experience. I mean, obviously you hope that's the case, but it wasn't something that I really processed before. And then the moment I saw that going on, I was like, oh, I you know, and then it became this joke. And she got married not too long ago. I officiated their wedding, really beautiful. And now they have a 2-month-old baby. And so whenever she brings people, she'll like message me and say, hey, I'm bringing so-and-so, you better bring your A game, you know? And I always laugh because then I joke with her and I say, well, like, as opposed to like my B game or something, you know, I don't know. But what I really wanted to kind of share at the beginning tonight, and to all our YouTube followers, good evening. Feel free to say hello, introduce yourself. I just want to touch on something briefly before we start the meditation practice. And it's something that came up from a question Saturday. And so it's been kind of like sitting in my head. And I'll try to retell it. But someone asked a question, and they've been, you know, sitting around here for a few years now. And to paraphrase, the question was, you know, they said they felt, I think they used the word defeated. I said, well, why is that? And they said, well, if the Buddha's practice was to help us free ourselves from aging, sickness, and death, and this was were you here Saturday? No. And this was 2,500 years ago, she said, and nobody else has figured it out. She said, that's kind of, you know, not great news for the rest of us. And it made me realize something, which is also very interesting with the, you know, potential of writing things down, is that if there's ever things that I say that you're unclear on or not sure or just want to like challenge or question, then by all means, hopefully everybody knows, like, you know, bring that to this, you know, space. Because all I do is share my understanding of what the Buddha taught, but I'm no different than anybody sitting there looking at me. Like for me, you are all the teachers and I'm just sitting here learning. And often you show up thinking it's the other way around, right? But we all just kind of learn and figure this stuff out together. But so when she said this, like, that nobody had figured out how to stop aging, sickness, and death, she felt like frustrated, defeated. And I'm going to give you, in very simple terms, the way to stop aging, to stop sickness, and to stop death. Anyone other than Travis back there know what it is? It's real simple. The Buddha actually taught it.
Don't be alive.
There you go. To not be alive. If you are alive, you cannot escape aging, sickness, and death. So the way she asked the question, it really just triggered something in me that said, be very clear around this concept, because when I introduced the idea, I'm not going to digress into the whole talk that I did Saturday, but when I introduced the idea of what the Buddha wanted to, why he left home and why he was seeking what he was seeking a way to liberate from aging, sickness, and death. Because as the Buddha taught, we have birth, we have aging, we have sickness, we have death. That's what we all get. But the practice isn't to figure out how to stop aging, sickness, and death. You can't stop that. Once you are born, once you are alive, we are all on that journey. All right? But at that time, when the Buddha was alive, they all believed in rebirth. So what they actually were practicing and wanting to attain was to free themselves from being reborn. And as I say often, how many of you came here tonight because you want to stop yourself from being reborn? Probably not the case. You weren't sitting at home and said, hey, we're going to go to meditation so we can figure out how to no longer be reborn. We, for the most part, weren't raised that way. We weren't taught that. So I think from a practice standpoint, it helps to kind of remove that idea of stopping yourself from being reborn as even anything that's worth much value at this stage of our practice. But what you want to look at is, what did the Buddha teach about how to stop ourselves from being born? To free ourselves from the cycle of birth and death. And what he taught with the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and minding our karma with what we think and say and do, that's the practice. So it's not about believing in rebirth or being concerned with rebirth or wondering if you're going to be reborn. All of that is really irrelevant. It's the practice part of things. So she's here a lot, and I'll bring it up again on Saturday if she's here, or on Saturday anyways, because a lot of people are, it's a lot of the same people. But I just wanted to clarify that point for anybody who may think that, you're going to stop yourself or that you're going to end those things. They're not going to end. But while we are alive, what can we do to make our lives a little more peaceful, a little happier, a little more gentle, a little more understanding, a little more kind, a little more compassionate towards self and others? Those are the practices. That's what we focus on. That's what the practice is about. So, make sense? Everybody clear on that? Wonderful. All right, so with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. Good evening, Cynthia and Brian and Linda and Brian. Good to be with you all tonight. We'll start with the meditation practice. There's a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, okay? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences, most likely. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, even on a chair or bench, often sliding forward, pushing the stomach forward as well. Allowing the shoulders to relax. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable for you. If you need to move, simply move. Doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means your leg hurts or you have an itch. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention and focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought? Return to breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. And for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. This practice is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's incredibly difficult to learn to stay present with life as it is. It's what we often, for much of our lives, have spent so much time trying to escape from, which is the life that we've created and live in. And this is learning to be with all of it. All the pleasant moments, all the unpleasant moments, and all the moments that, as the Buddha called them, are neutral. They're not really pleasant or unpleasant. But he talked quite a bit about pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and that's where much of our emotions and experiences abide throughout our day. And so one might think that being surrounded by positive things and good things is what this practice is about. And I'm not suggesting that you don't surround yourself with positive things or good things. But it's to recognize that our life isn't always surrounded by positive, wonderful, good things. And so instead of trying to run and create all of that, we have to try to learn to be with things as they are. And very often we don't like things the way they are. And we have an aversion to the way things are. So we learn to sit with it. Initially learning to recognize the thought patterns, the way our mind works, how thoughts arise and pass and cease to exist, and more thoughts arise and pass and cease to exist. And the just simple 20 minutes of sitting here during meditation, you had probably 78,000 thoughts, give or take a couple, And so that's just the way our life is. Our mind will continue to race and have thoughts. What we practice is just learning to be with them. That whatever your thoughts were, whether they were pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, you just sat with them. And that skill in itself is incredibly important, because as you go through our day and we have tremendous conflict and drama and experiences that we have to face, they all begin with the thoughts we have towards a current situation. And very often when our thoughts are unpleasant, you ever had a ton of unpleasant thoughts and then gone out and do lots of really wonderful, good things? Doesn't usually work that way, So the practice of recognizing the thoughts and just sitting with them is critical, because that can really change your entire day. It's so easy to just recognize unpleasant thoughts, and then those unpleasant thoughts turn into unpleasant words, and then those unpleasant words turn into unpleasant actions, and then those unpleasant actions just cycle back into more unpleasant thoughts. And then 30 years go by and you're stuck in this vicious cycle of unpleasant thoughts, unpleasant words, unpleasant actions. I know that all too well because for 30 years I was stuck in unpleasant thoughts, unpleasant words, and unpleasant actions. And that's a miserable way to live. So we practice first with the recognition of what we think, learning to be with it, opening your heart to your thoughts, regardless of whether they're what we would call good or bad, and just being with them. And that's difficult. But again, that's why we practice. So meditation is not the escape. It doesn't fix things. It makes you become aware simply of your own thoughts, your own words, and your own actions. This is what the Buddha called karma. That's it. We generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. And again, not that it's your intention for coming here this evening, but the Buddha taught to free yourself from the cycle of birth and death is to neutralize your karma, to where your body, speech, and mind, your thoughts and words and actions are beautiful. So with that, I'll pause. I really always prefer just to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll just respond to your thoughts or questions. And same thing to all of our YouTube folks out there. Feel free. I can see the screen here, so feel free somewhere on your computer or whatever you're on. There's a chat box. Feel free to type in questions, and I'll do my best to respond to that as well. Yes, sir.
When you were talking about unpleasant speech words, had me thinking about something about the whole concept of right speech in Buddhism. Can you remind me what part of that is right speech part of in Buddhism?
When you say what part of it, are you saying where in the Eightfold Path? Is
the
that
Eightfold Path? That's exactly. Okay. So it made me think of the right speech and the Eightfold Path, and I know part of that is just not having so much unnecessary speech as well, and speech that is, I think, frivolous and negative and things like that. And made me think about kind of a question I've been asking myself for a while now, is like, how much of that is necessary? For example, I play poker with some friends at my house. I'll come over, and these are all mostly guys that aren't on any kind of spiritual path or into Buddhism or anything like that. And this goes for many relationships I have. How much of that speech, we'll sit around for hours and talk and everything, and that's a lot of frivolous talking. So how much of that is necessary, and how much of it is detrimental? Because on one hand, I do want to have personal relationships and have lots of friends, and I enjoy that, but I always do have that in the back of my mind of, there was times where I was very, didn't have a whole lot of that in my life. I wasn't constantly talking, and I did notice more clarity. And so that's something I'm always asking myself, and I'm not sure the answer. I'm going to think about that.
As always, I don't have an answer per se, but let me give a little bit of context for anyone who might be new, and then I'll address specifically your example. And it's, it's something I relate to very clearly, and I'll get to that in a minute. But, and I'll start with this. It's an important question because it impacts your everyday life. And when this practice and path starts to make a difference in your life, it brings you to the point where you are actually looking at like, wow, I just sat here for 4 hours. I'll start this part and I'll come back to the structure of a minute. I just sat here for 4 hours or 10 hours or whatever it is, and just had random and mindless gossip and chatter and slander for hours. I used to go to Vegas a lot. I've sat a lot of poker table. Actually, blackjack was my thing, or roulette. But, there wasn't too much kind speech during that time. There wasn't too much mindful speech. There was tons of things that were completely unnecessary, right? Which is interesting because then there was a time where I got into Buddhism, but I was still into all the other stuff I was into. And then I would like bring those two together, and it's like, wow, what would it be like to sit at the blackjack table silently for 4 hours, you know? And then I tried to convince myself that I was like mindfully playing blackjack, you know? I tried to tell myself that I was like doing some Buddhist practice within my whatever, and that if I won money, then I was going to go do good things with it. You'll start to trick yourself a little bit, right? Let me back up. I just wanted to say that while I was fresh on my head. Again, for those who might be new, just to give it some context. So the Buddha taught very clearly, and I'll run through this kind of quickly, but Four Noble Truths, very first teaching. He said, life is filled with dukkha, suffering. Doesn't mean your whole life sucks. It just means you're going to suffer a lot. And the second thing he says is, what's the cause? The cause is greed, anger, ignorance. We always want more. We're angry at the way things are, and we're ignoring the truth, meaning we think our view is always correct. And that's the second noble truth. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering, liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the path, and this is the Eightfold Path. And he taught very directly that these 8 steps, having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. All available on Google for free, and your entire life you can do nothing but practice the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, because that's the path to ending your suffering. It's all right there, all of it. So you literally never have to read or explore anything else in Buddhism other than the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Right? Now, when you look at the Eightfold Path, view, thought, speech. Speech is the third one, but these do go in order. Right? What's interesting to me always about the Eightfold Path is, what is the thing that often draws people to Buddhist practice? What's the thing that people typically show up to places like this for? Concentration, meditation, right? You know where that is on the Eightfold Path? It's at the end. It's last. Views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort. Then we get to mindfulness and concentration. So I, like many people, enter this journey because we want to meditate for whatever reason. But what we often overlook is the fact that, what about the first 6 things that he was talking about? The first 6 things that we struggle with are the reasons our head is such a mess to begin with. It's the reason we want to learn about meditation, mindfulness, concentration, because our heads are a scattered mess. Why? Because our views are that life is all about us. This is just an example. Our thoughts are often just about us. Our speech, so getting to that directly, again, I just wanted to give it some context. Our speech, as the Buddha taught, to refrain from gossip, to refrain from slander. Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it true? All these things, mindless chatter, which is what 5 hours of poker is. All right? Now, I'll come back to this. I don't want to crush you. I'm not suggesting you quit poker. My suggestion is that, he also said don't gamble, but that's a whole other thing, right? My suggestion is to recognize that, not explore this as from a place of, is this right or wrong or good or bad? And I'm not saying you were asking that question, but to look at it as, what type of karma am I creating? Lots. In every single thing we do. Whether we're playing poker, whether we're having lunch with a friend, whether we're reading a book, whatever it is we're doing, we are generating karma. Our thoughts, our words, and our actions. There's a great sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra. Have you read it?
No.
So normally I always say you don't need to read anything else. Now I'm going to suggest you read the Vimalakirti Sutra, right? One of the Buddhist's wisest disciples. And his life was spent going into brothels, gambling houses, places like this to help awaken those who were there. You could bring wonderful insights. They may never invite you back, right? So the thing in and of itself, it's not about labeling one place as good or bad or right or wrong. It's recognizing where is our mind in that place, right? And very specifically with right speech, again, as I said, slander, gossip, divisive speech. Is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it truthful? So much of our speech, and not just in that example, but throughout our entire day. I mean, just think, like, how many people did you all talk about today? Possibly a lot, possibly none. It just depends. But to recognize that we're very often wrapped up in talking about others. Mindless gossip, mindless chatter is where we spend so much of our time. Now, I want to point this out because something you said, which is very important. These are your friends, right? These people are important to you. Now, why it was such a personal thing for me, when I first really got into this practice in 2003, the first 2 years, I just pretty much bailed all my friends.